Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
What we'll be talking about, we're not sure.
Right. Yeah, we're kind of playing it week to week at this point, but we want to welcome everybody to the podcast, episode 588. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're 12 away from 600. Have you thought at all about your top 600?
Well, that's the That's the big question, right? Are we
Yeah.
doing a top 600?
It would be, it'd be breaking tradition to not do it.
I know, but so on one side, I love the idea of us running down our 600 to 501st favorite film. I mean, what an absolutely ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah.
I would say. And on the other side, do I actually want to do the work to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets harder and harder every time. In my opinion.
Farther you get away from like those core favorites,
right?
Then you're this like, yeah, Schindler's List. That's a really good movie that I watched once.
Sure.
And above that is Mighty Ducks 2, another movie that.
Yeah. And we haven't quite entered. I mean, I don't know. Maybe 501 to 600 will do it to me, but we haven't quite hit that phase where I don't actually care about these movies.
Right.
So why am I even putting them on a list type of thing? Like I didn't have any yet where I was like, I don't even remember what this is about. Why did I rank it that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thing. But I feel like we will enter that territory at some point.
Well, and for me, I've only seen 2,500 movies, which I'm sure for a lot of people is a lot. But then when you're ranking like your top 600, that's a quarter of the movies I've seen that I'm now.
Right.
So
that you're now trying to include.
Right. And I'm definitely getting to like, yeah, these are movies that I gave a 3.5 to, or I saw 30 years ago and I think I liked. So
right. Yeah.
But I do think the answer is yes, we're doing it because
you think it's worth the joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
All right. Then I guess we're doing it.
Until it gets to the point where we're literally talking about movies we don't like anymore.
Sure.
like these are no longer favorites. These are just movies we've ranked. Then maybe we can retire it. I would say if we can get to a top 1,000, which that also means we got to 1,000 episodes, which would be pretty incredible too. But
sure.
Maybe at 1,000, we can both retire the list and the show.
You know what we don't do often, but we really should, is sprinkle in some negativity. Like we never do like movies we hated or things that were overhyped or, you know what I mean? We rarely dip into that world. And yet that'd probably be more controversial than some of our takes on like favorite lists.
I do feel like we've done a top 10 disappointments before.
We have. It happens occasionally.
Right.
But I think we should sprinkle more in.
Well, there's also so many movie podcasts that like to just crap on movies.
All right.
That I think it's okay that we're not going to join in the, like, this is why this is a turd. Right. 43 reasons why.
Zach and I have a difference of opinion on those podcasts and those like YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Okay.
Like, he really likes videos. Oh, what are the ones called? Like Cinema Sins
or
on
Screen
YouTube,
Rant or something.
Where they like basically just or like everything wrong with in 10 minutes type of stuff.
Yeah.
And they're very popular.
Oh yeah.
And I don't like them. One, I don't like them from like a I don't like them just because I don't enjoy them. But I also don't like them because I think it builds a weird culture of like people that like, I think the people making the videos have like a little bit of an edge of sarcasm. Like,
right.
We're doing a ridiculous thing here. We, as the people making the video, know we're doing a ridiculous thing here. And just because we can point out 100 things that are wrong about The Godfather does not mean The Godfather is a bad movie.
Right. And so many of them are like continuity errors.
Right.
Which I'm like, okay,
it's nitpicking.
Right. It is. Yeah.
But you read the comments under those videos, and there are a lot of very vocal people who don't see it as sarcasm, who think that like that's how you should watch these things, and that if it was good, it wouldn't have issues like that. And it builds like a weird culture where unless the thing's perfect or unless it's, you know what I mean? It's just
Mhm.
or like this weird culture of people who like to pick things apart just because they troll. Like they're trolling something. They don't
Right, because they
actually
just want
care
to
about
point
this
out
thing.
all the problems with it, and they say, I know you love this, but you're stupid for loving this because of here's all the 100 things wrong with it." Like I feel like it's a superiority thing.
Right.
Of like
Yeah.
I can see all the cracks and seams, so I know this is bad, even though everyone else says this is the greatest.
Yeah. And I personally kind of feel like if you're doing this and you're doing it with a wink and a nod because you actually love movies, but you think this is fun and sarcastic and like totally a ridiculous thing to do, that's great until the videos get 2 to 3 million per views.
Mhm.
That's building an army of people who a good portion of them don't understand nuance.
Are you saying nuance is lost on the internet, James?
For sure.
Is this a bold claim you are making?
Right. And I've had discussions in person with people where
Right.
I'm like, they don't like the thing because of this one little thing. And I'm like, that's not how you should evaluate art, in my opinion. Like, just because one thing is wrong. It's kind of like people who won't watch the Star Wars movie because there's a female heroine all of a sudden. You know what I mean? It's like,
Oh, like
really?
like the
That's why you're
Skywalker
going to
ones,
hate
yeah.
the whole thing? You can't admit that, like, it's still 90% entertaining? You know what I mean?
I mean,
It's like, are you crazy? Just because you
they
don't like one thing about it, the whole thing is garbage. You know what I mean?
in their defense, they probably also don't like the fact that there's a person of color in the main cast too. So
Sure. I'm just saying, like,
I'm not saying, and I'm not actually coming to their defense. I'm just
I think
saying.
the long tail of that type of thinking is that type of thinking.
Right.
You know what I mean? Is like it's all bad. If this one thing is bad, it's all bad. And
Right. If I can find this one plot hole, then the whole thing is ruined, and
Right.
it doesn't make
Exactly.
sense. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know. They don't. People don't understand creative license or artistic license or suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And there's this whole need that like everything must logically fall into place, and if it doesn't logically fall into place, then it's a bad movie.
Yeah. The other thing is too, and we'll start the episode proper shortly, but
No, we get our rant in first. It's okay.
the other thing that I don't like about those videos is like, and this might be because I do like marketing stuff.
Yeah.
I'm publishing videos online for clients. I'm publishing websites, other things. Um, if I made something and like somebody made a 20-minute video pointing out 100 things wrong with it, and then it got 3 to 4 million views, and there's just like comment after comment about what an idiot my everybody that worked on the movie is,
Mhm.
or whatever the piece of media is. I don't think that's healthy.
No.
I don't think it fosters a healthy community. I don't think it would be healthy for the people who worked on the thing to see that that's happening. Again, if it was like a niche people who were all in on the joke, fine, but that's not where it currently sits, in my opinion. So I think it's more damaging to like online discourse than it is beneficial as a fun thing that exists. But
And
that's just me.
yeah.
I know other people love it. I'm like, can't. I do like watching videos where they're talking about all the Easter eggs, and maybe they might talk about a continuity point here or
Right.
there or something like that. I don't obviously I'm not against film criticism, critiquing something, but
But that feels like that's bad faith criticism. Like it is watching it's watching a movie for the purpose of finding everything wrong.
right,
And I would say that professional criticism, or even, like what we try and do, like not that we're professionals, but we try and watch a movie objectively to the best we can.
right,
And if we don't like it, we don't like it. But I say like we have rational reasons. We're not watching movies just for the sake of like, oh, I'm going to hate this movie, and I'm going to find all the reasons why I'm going to hate it.
yeah. We try to find legitimate reasons that can be like explained to
Right.
dislike something as opposed to a plot hole. I mean, we're probably not perfect in all of those
Oh,
things
and of course
either,
not.
but yeah. I mean, those nitpicky videos, again, I wouldn't have the problem with them if they didn't get the views that they get. And it's people hate watching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's people, the vast majority of it is that culture and not just people who love to or who are in on the joke on some level. It's like if the Onion kept publishing knowing that the vast majority of the people that read the Onion believed it.
Oh, like they did not realize it was satire.
Right. I think the Onion, most of the people coming to the website know it's satire, take it as such, think it's funny because of it, and a small percentage get caught in the web, right? Who don't come to it.
Yeah, people repost Onion articles like, "Can you believe this?" I'm like, yeah, it's the Onion.
Right. Whereas the CinemaSins of the world and those types of articles, videos, podcasts, those are people that understand at some point that the fan base is actually more people who just want to troll something, want to tear it apart, not out of love, out of like some weird, I don't know, psycho joy of like tearing something apart.
Right. Yeah. It's the joy of tearing down something great. It makes you feel better. It's what bullies do.
Right. Exactly.
Did you know the Onion is from Madison, Wisconsin?
I feel like I did know that because you've probably told me, but that is
or Zach might have told you too.
Could be.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked that the Onion still exists, considering how our world's been the last 10 years.
Because news is ridiculous. The actual news is so ridiculous that it feels like satire.
It might, yeah.
Or because of fake news in general.
I always wonder, like, did things change near as fast in the 90s and I just wasn't plugged in to what was going on in the world? Or does society change faster today? And that's like legitimate, and it's something I've noticed, and it's real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
So I'm not a sociologist.
Right.
And I have not studied this. But my impression is that society is changing faster now than it was in the other histories of human existence. And I would assume that the internet and connectivity and the information age is contributing to that.
Sure.
That people just process information so much faster. And it feels like news has such a shorter half-life than it used to have, where what used to be a big piece of news was forgotten about in a week because something else happens. And is that because continuous ridiculous things happen, or is it because we just have this constant feed of information so that we always just focus on what's happening now and not what happened in the past? I'm not sure. But yes, I would say that things seem to be changing faster than they were.
Yeah, that's how it feels like. It's just hard to know if that's a feeling or the truth.
Right. Or is this just like two approaching middle-aged guys here being like, man, society's really changing, blah, blah, blah. Kids these days. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. It's definitely hard to tell sometimes. Yeah. This week.
Okay.
The former president got indicted, and it feels like nobody cares. For the second time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think people care. I think there's unfortunately a large population in this country that do not care. Or I should say they care that he was indicted for the wrong reasons, as in it's a witch hunt. It's political, right? You know, they're thinking we're living in some, I don't know, dictatorship.
I remember being in the car with my father as a teenager and hearing him listen to Rush Limbaugh, and Rush Limbaugh just absolutely rail on politicians for the tiniest little things. And it feels like we are in a world where right now these are not tiny things, and yet they're not even getting the same air as what tiny things used to get.
Right.
Like I remember when Dan Quayle like spelled potato wrong.
Potatoes wrong.
And that was like a months long controversy. Or I don't know. I can't even think of another example. But yeah, it used to be like an unelectable offense to misspell a word on a national stage. Seems, we're so far away from that at this point. It feels like
they were simpler times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they weren't, and I just have that potato story in my brain, and I didn't see all the other things that were going on. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Dan Quayle was not the smartest man, or at least cannot present himself as a smart man in public.
Right.
And I think how people remember him for that is potato. But there are other instances of Dan Quayle not being able to articulate himself very well.
Sure.
That are harder to pin down than potato.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Speaking of potatoes,
we're here to really tear into some movies, right? That's what we're doing today.
So we're gonna tear them apart. We're gonna rip.
Yep. I mean, we hate watch 2 movies. I don't know about you, but I have a long list of problems.
I'm not sure I hate watch them, but if you did, that's fine. Yeah, we saw 2 movies this week. We're going to talk about them. One of them is a sequel, an action sequel, and one of them is not.
One of them is like the 5th kind of this movie we've gotten this year so far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we're going to talk Extraction 2 and Blackberry, as you've seen in the title. I'm guessing we don't necessarily have to. We didn't talk about this before, but we don't have to go too spoiler specific on either of these. I don't think
there's anything super spoilery in Extraction 2 or Blackberry.
Right. So maybe we'll hold back a few key details, but nothing that would change your enjoyment of the movie or that needs real in-depth discussion either.
Right.
So yeah, no spoiler for this week. And are you ready to get this party started?
Let's jump into it.
Thanks, Pink. Let's talk.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did not pick up on that at all.
Have you seen that video of Pink in concert?
Is there a specific one you're referring to?
Oh, you haven't. If you didn't know that.
No. Okay.
So Pink in concert. I didn't know this, but she used to be an acrobat, and so in concert she connects herself to a rope that goes on like either side, and there's like a computer generated pulley system, and so she'll be at a concert venue and be on stage singing, and all of a sudden she will just lift up off the stage like 100 feet in the air.
Oh, cool.
And fly to the opposite side of the and she's like flipping with the microphone in her hand.
I've seen this video.
It'll stop her dead like 100 feet off the ground in the middle of an arena, and she will sing the next verse, and then it'll flip her to the other side of the arena and like back and forth. And it's just like, that's an insane thing to do as a performer. Anyway, I don't necessarily even like Pink or listen to her, but when I saw that video online, I was like, respect. Like, that's somebody who's trying to give people their money's worth.
I have respect for Pink. I like some of her, like I grew up with her music in college, so I definitely have some nostalgia connection to it. Not a ton of it, more the hits, but I respect her as an artist. I think she's talented, and
she does things her own way.
She does things her own way. Kind of did a rock pop crossover, you can kind of call her. So yeah.
Speaking of rock pop crossovers, let's talk Extraction 2. This movie is on Netflix. We're gonna get into it right after this clip.
Tyler, we got your 6.
Got it. Nick, get rid of these guys.
Already on it.
One threat down.
Nick, you got 2 points. I'm coming in quick.
Hurry!
Hang on tight.
UTV on our left.
That was Extraction 2. Extraction 2 is the sequel to the original Extraction. It's a 2023 American action thriller directed by Sam Hargrave and written by Joe Russo of the Russo brothers.
That's right.
This movie stars Chris Hemsworth. Oh man, I really should have read these names in advance. Goshifte Farahani.
Sure, it's probably Goshifte Farahani. Yeah.
Goshifte Farahani. Adam Bessa.
Uh-huh.
Olga Kirilenko.
Sure.
Daniel Bernhardt. Tinatin Dalakishvili.
Yep.
And Idris Elba. I know that one.
Yeah, that one. Good.
The official IMDb plot synopsis for Extraction 2 is: after barely surviving his grievous wounds from his mission in Dhaka, Bangladesh, Tyler Rake is back and his team is ready to take on their next mission.
Grievous?
Grievous?
Okay, wait, this is grave? Are they saying previous? This is on IMDb, correct?
Yeah, IMDb. Grievous.
His grievous wounds. I don't know if that's the right use of the word grievous.
Grievous. Severe. Serious.
Okay.
According to...
Is it like a short for grave?
I just think it means severe or serious.
Okay. Which is also what grave means, right?
Right, but it wouldn't necessarily... Yeah, I mean, grave, I guess you could use in a context that isn't related to death. But I feel like that's more associated with death than grievous.
I guess most people associate Grievous with the Star Wars character.
Right.
Okay.
Four-armed robot.
Yeah. All right. His grievous wounds.
Yep.
His previous grievous wounds.
Right. It's that plot summary. Let's read it again. After barely surviving his grievous wounds from his mission in Dhaka, Bangladesh, Tyler Rake is back and his team is ready to take on their next mission. It's literally not the plot at all.
That is not the plot whatsoever.
Like, these plot descriptions are getting a little ridiculous because that is the setup to the plot. You know what I mean?
It's the intro. It's the preamble to the movie.
Right. But there's no mention of what at all is potentially going to happen in this movie.
Do you think you could describe the plot to this movie?
Oh, you're going to challenge me to describe the plot?
Well, you usually ask Zach or I to do it, so I thought I'm going to put it back on you.
I'm not good at it. So Tyler has a wife or an ex-wife.
Right.
And his ex-wife has a sister who is married to a mobster who has a brother. And these two brothers run a crime syndicate in where? I'm drawing a blank.
I believe it was the country of Georgia.
Right. The country of Georgia. And so the wife is being held in a cell with her two children by the husband.
Yeah.
Or is he in jail? He's just running the jail, basically.
No, he's in jail because he got in trouble with the Americans.
Right.
So,
but since he's a mobster, he's paid everybody off, so he gets like insane privileges.
Right, right. Like his family is in the jail with him.
Mm-hmm. And like his bodyguards, and he's basically got his own little wing of the jail.
It's kind of like a Pablo Escobar situation where he's in prison, but he's just living in his house.
Right.
Right.
And so the wife and her two children are in the jail with them, and they don't like that situation, and he's a mean guy anyway, and so they're trying to get out. And so Tyler Rake, aka Thor, gets a new mission to go to Georgia with his team and break her out of prison with her two children and get her away from the bad husband
and the brother.
Gangster. And the brother.
Correct. Yep.
So that's generally the plot. And really, we don't have to tell you how it ends because it's a dumb action movie. So you can probably figure it out. I mean, there's some specifics along the way that might be interesting, but we don't really have to go into them too much. And Yeah, was there anything I missed that should be in there?
I think that's the core of it, plot wise.
Okay. And I think just to recap, we talked about Extraction 1 way back when that came out, and I think we both agreed that it was better than most Netflix movies.
Yes, it was. I rewatched Extraction 1.
Oh, okay.
And it is a good dumb action movie.
Okay.
Yeah. It's I think probably best known for having a fake yet propulsive oner in the first Extraction.
And in this one, they really lean in to the idea of oners.
Yes, this one has we can talk about it. I thought a very interesting and effective. The prison break is a 20-minute fake oner.
Sure. I mean, there's, as far as I could tell, there were 3 extended oners in this.
Okay. I guess the one that stood out to me was the prison break. What were the other 2 for you?
Well, maybe they were all connected. Is the train sequence a part of that? There's a little bit between those, right?
Was the the trains, for me, the train sequence was all part of it. But
right. I mean, if you count all of that together, I think it's more like an hour oner, but it doesn't actually go it the entire way. There's like a little bit of narrative between pieces of that escape.
So
I mean, the whole movie is an escape.
Correct. Yes. Maybe the train was a separate oner, because I do remember feeling like this oner was 30 or 40 minutes long.
Right.
Which is still impressive.
I would say the centerpiece from an action perspective is there's a moment when they're breaking out of the prison and they have to get through this courtyard.
Yes. A courtyard full of both prisoners and riot guards.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's Thor and the mother trying to make their way from one side of the courtyard to the other in the middle of a prison riot, essentially. And it was really, it was weird. I liked it.
Yeah.
You could tell there was a lot of CG going on, but it was interesting how they made it flow in an interesting way and had people come like in and out of the shots, and just how much background chaos they had going on in a oner.
Is this the one that had Molotov cocktails flying also throughout the sequence?
Yeah, I mean, he literally gets like fire hands at one point and starts beating people with fire coming off
with
of
a
his
flaming
fists.
hand. Yeah,
right. All of a sudden, he's Ryu or something.
Oh, Ryu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why you would watch this is not because the plot is particularly interesting or unique. It's more because you want to see wall-to-wall action, and hopefully they presented it in a way that is somewhat unique.
Yeah, I would say this is well-directed action. Both the first Extraction and this one, like, it's chaotic and there's a lot going on. And yeah, obviously these are fake oners, so there's a lot of fast camera movements and like, pushing into objects and pushing out to do the transitions. But I never felt lost during these action scenes. And I think that is, for me, that is the mark of a successful action movie. Is, can you watch the action and you understand where people are positioned and what's happening, and you can have this I don't know this realness to it, right? Versus sometimes you watch an action scene in a movie and you're like, because how it's directed or how it's cut, you just can't like tell who's punching who or who's fighting who, or what. Like Matrix 4, didn't the Matrix 4 have kind of disappointing action sequences where it was always kind of fast and muddy and you were never quite sure what was going on?
Yeah, it was like way zoomed in and fast cutty.
Exactly.
Whereas I remember the first couple of Matrices having moments of like pull out and show a lot of stuff in the frame. And we didn't get that from Matrix 4.
No.
In this one, you're definitely in the action. Like the camera is just like another body that's doing the dance.
It's constantly moving through these sequences. Yeah.
Yeah. Constantly. And there are long sequences of action. It kind of reminded me, did you ever see Hardcore Henry?
I have not. I'm intrigued by that, but I also heard from people that the novelty wears off pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could totally watch it.
Okay.
It has almost no plot, but it does chain things in an interesting way, and it's first person, whereas this movie is not first person.
Correct.
But the way they chain things in that, I was reminded of that by watching this because it's pretty relentless. Um, and so is this movie, I would say. There's a couple moments, especially towards the beginning, of like quiet character building.
You're right.
They're thin. You know, the character building is pretty thin. It's a lot of like people showing up and giving knowing looks at each other. You know what I mean? It's very little like dialogue. Like
Oh.
the wife husband or wife Thor relationship is like
Right.
they barely even speak. It's just clearly she's not happy with him, and they don't even really go into why. Or
Well, I mean,
don't know.
they have a dead child.
Sure, but like they don't talk about it any more than they talked about it in the first one.
No, it's mostly she was like, "You're never around," and he was like, "I couldn't face it," and that was the extent of the dialogue.
Right.
I couldn't fix it, or something like that.
And like what Kyle just said is like maybe a quarter of the total dialogue about
Right.
the subject in the movie. You know what I mean? Like you're not exaggerating. They literally don't talk about it. They mention it without really going into it.
It's not a character study on grief while you're
Yeah.
watching.
And they kind of
Extraction
treat
2.
everything that way. Like the relationship between the husband and the wife in the prison cell is like very cartoony and quick. They just need to give you enough information to set up that there's a reason why she wants to leave, and there's a reason why Thor is going to go after this guy.
Right.
And so that's why you're watching this movie, is like just give you enough setup to understand those things, and then let's get into the action and keep this train rolling.
One thing this movie gave me a little bit of, which I kind of wish they had more fun with,
Mhm.
was there was some ridiculous action going on when they were fighting in the weight room,
Mhm.
where like he was using like bench or whatever, like rowing machines. He would wrap a cord around a guy's neck and then let go, and then the weight would like pull him across the room. And like at one point there's like a leg press. There was a guy on the leg press, and he let the leg press go, and the leg press crushed the whatever bad guy he was fighting. And
Right.
I was kind of digging that. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, you know, this sort of use your environment sort of fighting. And I wish they'd done a little bit more with that. There was like 3 of those moments in that fight. And I
Mhm.
kind of wish the entire fight was sort of like, you know, how John Wick will take a room full of knives, like just have a giant knife fight for
Mhm.
5 minutes. I kind of wish this was like let's just have a gym fight where the only weapons are whatever's lying around the gym at the moment.
Yeah, I kind of felt definitely some deja vu with the recent John Wick movies, for sure. Like rewatching all the John Wick movies a couple months ago, and then watching
Right.
John Wick 4, and then watching this, I was like, they're kind of doing John Wick, but like without all the assassin weirdness. More just
Yeah.
like this is a military contract for hire guy, and
Right.
he's, I guess, in every movie he's going to have to pull somebody out of a bad situation and just fight his way out of it. I guess
It-
that's the title, Extraction. You know what I
Extraction
mean?
is going to be him rescuing people. Yeah.
Right.
From hordes of faceless bad guys.
Yeah, this movie also did what John Wick 4 did quite a bit, and all the John Wicks, in that a lot of bad guys have masks on because they're clearly recycling stuntmen and stuff like that.
Stuntmen, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had, this is more of a criticism. I guess this one, they were fighting Georgian military gangsters. So it was
Mhm.
more like, okay, the first one, he kills a lot of like, Bangladeshi cops,
Mhm.
and they write it off as like, oh, they're all corrupt.
Right.
I was like, well, yeah, maybe like the top brass is corrupt, but I'm pretty sure if you're like a cop in a corrupt system, you don't have a huge choice in the whole matter. So
Right.
like that rubbed me the wrong way in the first one, just of like all the quote unquote innocent death.
Mhm.
And this one, they're like, okay, well now they're all just evil Georgia gangsters, so we can dispatch them, no problem. It's who cares? They all chose to be here.
Yeah, I wonder if that was conscious, like they had heard that criticism of the first movie, and so they were like, in this one, we're just going to make it clear that like the cops are never involved. You know what I mean? We're never shooting authority figures. to get out
No.
of the situation. We're always going to go up against,
Gangster.
the bad
And
guys.
in fact, they have the bad guys shoot at cops at one point.
Mhm.
So I think they're really trying to establish who the moral side of things, where at least in the first extraction, there was some moral greatness because he was, if you remember, he was extracting a drug dealer's son who was being threatened by another drug dealer.
Really?
Yeah.
I do not remember that. I imagine I also will forget the plot of this movie very quickly.
Oh, I had to
think
rewatch the first one.
Yeah, I'll remember them for the extended one, presented as one take
Mhm.
action sequences, and I will forget all the details other than that for sure. That's definitely not why I watch these movies.
No, I was in need of a dumb action movie.
Sure.
I've been kind of jonesing for one for a while, and this filled that need for me.
Nice.
I also liked how they expanded upon his team.
Mhm.
Right, the team
Yeah,
is
that was another question. Since you recently rewatched it, they pretend kind of like these people were a part of his team from the first movie, but I don't remember that.
they are. I mean,
They
it's
are, okay.
mostly the woman whose name you had trouble pronouncing.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly cannot tell you if like her brother was in the first one. I think he was, but I don't think he was established as a family member to her whatsoever. I just think it's the same actor.
Right.
So
Is her
she
name
gets,
Mia?
Um,
No, that's the ex-wife.
Yeah, no, her name was
We
Nick.
should probably use names. Nick.
This is Go.
Okay.
Go. Oh man, Golshifeta.
Golshifeta Faharani.
Yeah, she played
Farahani.
Nick, and then Adam Bassa played her brother Yaz.
Right.
And so they're both in the first one. She gets a couple action moments, but she's more like she seems more like his handler in a sense, or the leader of the team. She's the one setting up the mission and then is there for the rescue at the very end. And in this case, they gave her and the rest of the team much bigger role of actually getting involved in I guess she was involved in she was involved in both the extraction and the defense at the end. And I thought that was really neat to like give the team more of a feature and make it less a one-man army movie and more of like a team movie, even though they all have the same skill of shooting well. It's not like Mission Impossible where it's the tech guy and the radio guy. They're all the gun person, but they work together.
Yeah, I also liked how his two team members were kind of like the opposite of him from a physicality perspective.
Right.
Like they're both much smaller people than what Chris Hemsworth looks like on camera.
Right.
And that they seem to actually be better from like a gun perspective than he was. Slightly. He's great at it, but at least they leaned into it a little more.
Like they're more surgical. He's more Mjolnir, a hammer.
Yeah, and there's like a fight where she's in the cab of a train and she's having a hard time dispatching two people, two grown men, because she's a smaller lady, I would say. Whereas like he'd just clean that out because he's a big bruiser dude.
He's a big 6 foot whatever dude. Yeah.
Right. I liked that they threw in like she's skilled and the other guy too, he's skilled, but when it comes down to it, like they're small. They need to have advantages in other ways type of thing. And I liked that it wasn't just that all three of them were perfect. Generally only he is. Generally only Chris Hemsworth somehow can just kind of mow through things and be unaffected.
Take a lot of stabbings and bullets and still seem to be okay.
Right. Yeah.
So after watching the first one and then this one, these movies love arm slings.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a good chunk of this movie, he's recovering and his arm's in a sling. And then in the first one, like both he and another guy like have a fight, and then it shows them separately. They both have their arms in slings, and they're in slings the whole time until they need to fight again. They're like, oh, time to take the sling off, I guess. So like, I don't think that's how sprains work. You can't just
decide to take it off.
Exactly. So, but I mean, it's probably a good way to show like, oh, they're injured. Their arms in a sling now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say about this movie because it's just kind of disposable action entertainment and doesn't have a whole lot of artistic merit beyond that.
No, I did want to share with you a piece of IMDb trivia.
Okay.
which I got a chuckle out of.
All right.
And I'm guessing that people can edit like trivia, like someone can write something and then someone else can edit what they said in the trivia section.
Mhm.
And this is definitely an example of a possibly edited trivia moment. Oh, I'm in the wrong extraction. No, I'm in extraction 2. It might have been removed.
What was
Oh.
it roughly?
I should. Okay. Well, basically in the spoiler section, someone was like, Idris Elba. Okay, so we didn't mention Idris Elba is in this movie, like briefly at the beginning and briefly at the end.
He's kind of the M of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Franchise, yeah.
So the trivia was something like Idris Elba makes a comment to Chris Hemsworth, like, "What'd you fall off a bridge or something?" And then it goes on to say, "This is a subtle nod to the Thor franchise where Idris Elba plays Heimdall, who is in charge of the Rainbow Bridge." And then
You're like, no, it's not.
Well, no, and this is where someone then came in, and then the next sentence was, "Or this is a reference to the previous movie where Tyler Rake fell off a bridge."
Right. At
And I
the
was like,
end of that movie.
Yeah, like, no, I don't think this is a subtle Thor reference between these two Thor actors. I think it's a little reference to the previous movie.
All right. A direct reference to exactly what happened.
What
in the last
happens,
30 seconds of that movie.
Not some wink and a nod to Marvel fans, like, "Oh, that's Heimdall on the Rainbow Bridge." So
Yeah. That is interesting. Isn't it's also interesting too that they're both Thor actors.
But yeah, but I mean, at this point, like most major actors are Marvel actors, so
Right, but Idris Elba and Chris Hemsworth were like
actually in Thor movies together.
They were in Thor movies together and they were like bonded. You know what I mean? Like those
Yes.
two characters were a big deal before Heimdall, passes in that series. So yeah. I can't think of another Marvel actor who have worked that close and then did things together later. Yet. I'm sure it's going to happen. But
yeah, I imagine Chris Evans will be paired up with another Marvel actor in the near future.
Sure. What do you think the future is for this franchise? I think they're probably going to do another one, right? I imagine.
Yeah.
They got to do at
Yeah.
least 3, I would imagine.
So I know Extraction is one of their most successful movies, like just by eyeballs or whatever their metric is. Obviously Netflix doesn't really share how they collect data.
Sure.
But their claim is that it's one of their most successful movies. And I'm going to assume that Extraction 2 is as successful, which it probably will be. They'll keep making these. Like, as long as Chris Hemsworth wants to make them, as long as the director is like, "Hey, I have another idea for a oner we can use as the tentpole centerpiece to this movie." Yeah, I don't imagine these are going away because they're easy to consume. Right? It's easy to throw on the TV. Is international appeal because the dialogue is minimal, so it's not just an American movie. It is action movies do very well overseas,
right? And there's like very little plot to understand, so they translate everything, but I could watch this movie if it was in Georgian and understand like what was going on.
Right? I don't need I don't need dialogue to get the nuance of what's happening here.
Right, for sure.
So, I think as long as Chris Hemsworth wants to keep doing these, which I mean, it could be a steady paycheck for him. Of like just do an Extraction every couple of years. I mean, he's got Thor money, so it's not like he's hurting it or anything like that.
Sure. And unlike the first one, this one definitely doesn't end with the idea that like he's dead. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like the first one, they killed him. Spoiler alert for the first one. And then they were like, but we could always bring him back in some weird, silly way. And that's what they did.
Right. Yes. They brought, and in this one, this spoiler, it ends with Idris Elba being like, "You want to do more work?"
Right. Yeah.
So
they definitely set it up with like, he's ready to go for another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would like to see Idris Elba join the action foray in these movies. I was a little disappointed that he was just kind of there as the setup guy.
That's what I was thinking too. I wouldn't be shocked if in the next one or the one after that they, bring him in,
right,
and be like, "Oh, he's the handler, but he also has skills."
Oh, for
type of
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Although, he's not getting any younger, for sure. Idris
Yeah, but he's
Elba
in way
is-
better shape than you and I are.
That's true, but he's 50. So if you're gonna make one of these every 3 years, I think you should start making them. I mean, you should.
Keanu's pushing 60 and Cruise has already crossed 60, right?
Right. I mean, Cruise is like not doing. He does physical things. He does
Right.
stunts, but he's not doing the same type of action as what Keanu's doing. You know what I mean? He's not doing 30-minute long set pieces and having 3 of them in the same movie where you're constantly swinging around and punching people.
True. Yeah.
To me, that is far more physical than jumping from a building to a building, which is cool and hard to do, but not the same thing as the level of training you need to. Or like in the new one, I saw a clip of like him jumping off a cliff on a motorcycle. Very cool. I'm glad he's doing it, but not the same thing as training martial arts to be able to have the stamina to film
Right. It's
days at a
different kind
time
skill.
of action. Yeah. Which is what I imagine they did with this and with John Wick movies. So, but yeah, I'm into it. Anything else with this movie? That's all I got.
No, that's pretty much all I got for this.
Yeah. Would you recommend it?
I found this one less violent than the previous one, or less gory, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it has flashes, but I felt like the other one was more realistic, and this one is just kind of silly and over the top.
Right. Yeah.
And so like the weights moment where the guy gets squished, it's kind of like it's a gag more than a gross out.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend this if you like dumb action movies.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out. If you want action movies with, I don't know, a purpose,
substance,
yeah, you could skip this one. Like it's not as we've been talking about John Wick, we've been talking about Matrix, Mission Impossible. It's not as good as those kind of movies.
Sure. There's a scene where there's a car, there's like a Jeep escape like through the woods and stuff like that, and it really reminded me of Children of Men, because I know I've seen that sequence with the oner in Children of Men where they're talking about having the camera like go through the car and stuff like that, and how hard it was to like make that sequence in that movie, and how effective it is in that moment because you just spent a lot of time with some of the people in that scene.
Right, in that car, yeah.
In a quiet setting, and then it kind of rolls into that longer winner. And you contrast that with this one, where like in a movie full of these long takes, you have this moment where the camera's going in and out of the cars, and it's fun to watch, but you don't care about these people quite as much as you do in Children of Men. And there's a lot more CG going on. It's a little less convincing than the camera movements in Children of Men. So
yep.
There is like a version of this. Like Children of Men isn't necessarily an action movie, but it's punctuated with action. And so it's interesting to watch something like that has like a really interesting, intriguing story with characters that they've spent time building, and how effective, if a much smaller than the movie, those action scenes are compared to this one, which is serving like a whole different itch. You know what I mean? As far as action goes, which is like, I don't really care about the story. I just want to see fun, goofy action stuff. And I think if that's the purpose of making the movie and that's the purpose of watching the movie, then I think Extraction 2 pretty much fits that bill.
Yeah.
Well,
it fit my dumb action need. So I'm happy with it.
All right. What are you going to give it? Letterboxd style out of 5 stars.
3.5.
I'm a 3.5 as well.
Awesome.
2 3.5s for Extraction 2. We don't have to go into this too much, but what's up with the not putting a number in the title? Do we really have to put 2 lines like Roman numeral 2? Come on.
Oh, and to make it worse, in the actual movie, the 2 is the I in Extraction, and
Right.
then the left side of the O, they made the other Roman numeral 2, and I was like, okay, that's kind of dumb. Like we're four. It's
What are
like
we doing here?
yeah, we're it's like when they start forcing in 4s as like expendable 4. The 4 is like the letter A. It's like we're kind of forcing it in here a little bit. So
I know. It just seems like a silly thing to do. But yeah, whatever.
I mean, would you prefer this was like Extraction : the Georgia Escape or something? I don't know.
No,
It's
just
a
put
worse title.
Extraction and then the number 2.
Number instead of the Roman numeral. You know, I blame Rocky. And then Rambo.
What's the movie with Liam Neeson? Taken.
Taken.
Taken did it right. Taken
that-
is like Taken, Taken 2, Taken 3. Done.
Yeah.
No subtitles, no weird Roman numerals, no volume. Just Taken, Taken 2, Taken 3. Done.
You know, we can take it back even the Star Wars, they were doing Roman numerals. Can you think of a movie that was doing Roman numerals before Star Wars? I guess Rocky. I already said there's Rocky, so.
For some reason, it doesn't bother me with Star Wars. Probably because it's been that way my whole life.
Okay.
All right. Well, as long as they keep up the pattern, it's allowable.
Do you think they're gonna make the E a backwards 3 for Extraction 3 or something dumb like that, or do you think it's gonna be 3 Roman numerals, or is it gonna be the I one side of the O and the other side of the O is the 3?
If they do the official title, not the title in the movie, but the title that is in the marketing as Extraction with 3 lines, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
But no 3 lines : subtitle. No spelling out the word 3. No putting the E as the 3 officially. That type of stuff. I don't like that. The idea of any of that.
Okay.
But we'll see. Let's move on to our next film, which might be the complete opposite from an approach and subject matter.
If I watched this movie in Georgian, I would have been completely lost.
For sure. 100%. That's true. The second movie we watched this week was titled Blackberry. This movie is on VOD. So you can stream it at home for a premium. And we're going to talk about it right after this clip.
55, we're back with Fox 5 Consumer News. A global BlackBerry crisis this morning. The company says it's experiencing massive service interruptions. The company's helpline says that users can expect delays in sending and receiving messages.
Yes, we are aware of the problem, and we are sorting it out right now. What's down over there, doggy? We've been down for this long. All of that is down there. Are we totally fine? Hey! Quiet! Let's just keep it down out here, guys, for a second.
How many are down? Maybe 10,000? Oh, Jesus. Okay. Hello?
You have a collect call from.
What the is happening?
Will you accept the charges? Are you still there?
Yes, I accept.
Thank you.
That was Blackberry. This is a 2023 Canadian biographical comedy drama. This movie is directed by Matt Johnson. It's also written by Matt Johnson and Matthew Miller. And it stars Glenn Howerton, Jay Baruchel, Matt Johnson, Rich Sommer, Michael Ironside, Martin Donovan, Michelle Guiraud, Sun Wan Chow, Mark Critch, Saul Rubinek, and Carrie Elwes, amongst others. The official IMDb plot synopsis for Blackberry is the story of the meteoric rise and catastrophic demise of the world's first smartphone. Now that's a plot description. That's what it is.
I would
for
agree.
sure. So this is a movie that I saw a month ago.
Okay.
I have not seen since. I know you've seen it far more recently than that. So
I watched it about 6 hours ago.
nice. So you might have to fill me in on some of the specifics that I've
Would
since
love to.
forgotten. But I definitely wanted to talk about this movie, and that's why I'm up for talking to it a month later, because it has not left my
Interesting.
consciousness as like something I enjoyed.
Okay.
And certainly I was hoping it would come up on a top 10 last 10, if anything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I gotta talk about this movie a little bit. And so I'm excited to actually have, had one of you guys seen it so I can talk about it with you. Just to give some context on this one, obviously, it's another movie about something in tech, or it's like something, it's about a recent historical event, I guess,
Right.
on some level.
This is
innovation.
another Tetris, another Air, another. Wasn't there also a There's another one of these movies came out this year that I haven't seen, Pinball or something like that.
Yeah, there's a pinball one.
Yeah.
There's got to be something else too that we've done in the last couple of years.
Feel like but it's not one of these like here's a recent story of the rise of some popular piece of technology and like how do we
Right.
get here? Again, these movies are Wikipedia articles brought to life.
Sure. Well, I mean, Jobs and Steve Jobs are less about like iPhone and stuff like that, but
True.
it's similar type of things. It's like
Yeah.
here's the story of how these things happen and the people surrounding them and stuff like that. Even maybe even the Fincher movie, the Facebook movie.
Oh, Social Network.
Yeah, is like
Yeah.
similar in concept. I think that movie maybe takes a little more artistic vision to pull off as far as
And
like
it's
yeah.
more of a character study too, of like less about the events and more about the man or the people.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, so we've seen a good deal of these. Some of them are mediocre and some of them are better than others for sure. And not necessarily, I don't think I've seen a bad one. Although I watched Flamin' Hot. Have you heard of that movie?
It's about the Cheetos.
About the Cheetos guy?
Yeah.
That was maybe the worst version of these types of movies that I've seen.
I could be wrong. Was that guy like a janitor or something?
So the movie says he was a janitor,
Okay.
but I've read up on the actual story, and evidently,
Okay.
like the guy who claims to have made the Flamin' Hot Cheetos, who wrote an entire biography with like chapters about how he did this,
Yeah.
evidently like embellished all kinds of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Like he was a janitor, but things didn't happen quite the way
Mhm.
he says they did. There's lots of people that have disputed his version of the events.
Okay.
Anyway, point is that this seems to be a trend of
For sure.
somewhat recent occurrence. And I kind of felt like I was tired of these things. And then this movie, Blackberry, showed up, and I think people were shocked that they enjoyed it. At least that's the hype that I got. Like from my circles was like people were like, "Oh, even if you're sick of these things, like there's something here.
Right.
It's interesting. It's a drama, but like it's actually a comedy at the same time. It's like a movie that takes itself seriously, but at the same time has like kind of this weird winky thing going where it's like we know this isn't reality. This is our version of the story type of thing. And like it wears itself on the sleeve in that way. And then to have
Right.
Jay Baruchel in the lead role, who's traditionally like a comedic actor who we really haven't seen much from lately. And on top of that, being directed and written by Matt Smith, who has done 2 previous movies that I enjoyed, that I think have interesting artistic presentation attached to them, I was all in. And so that's why I saw it in a movie theater when it was out.
Is that the Operation Avalanche guy?
Yes. Operation Avalanche and The Dirties are his 2 movies.
I haven't seen The Dirties, but okay, I've seen Operation Avalanche.
For those that don't know, The Dirties is a school shooting movie that's told found footage style from the
Great.
perspective of the killers.
I knew that, and I cannot wait.
It's interesting because the 2 guys who are the murderers, who are the school shooters, are obsessed with film. That's why they're filming themselves do it.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of like film nerd reference stuff in there where you're like, okay, I could kind of see how like people who are misguided could see things in media and like misinterpret things. I think it's fair. It's like not blaming the idea of like violence in movies because that's not the kind of movies they like. They like art movies and movies that make a point type of thing. It's not like they watched a bunch of Rambo movies and that's why they're shooting up the school.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's an interesting movie. And then they made Operation Avalanche, which is about the faking the moon landing.
The faking the moon landing. Yep, that's correct.
But they're both told kind of documentary style. The first one is first person, like found footage style. And the second one is like there's a documentary crew shooting things. And then in this movie, there's not a documentary crew, but it's shot kind of like there is.
It's shot documentary style. There's even a moment at the very beginning where the Glenn Howerton character is being shot documentary style, like in his car. And then he turns and he looks directly at camera and you feel like you've been caught. And then it cuts to actually what he's actually looking at.
Right.
But I thought that was a clever sort of nod at first you didn't know, okay, am I watching documentary style or not? Like, is it supposed to be presented like these people
as an
actually
actual documentary?
Exactly.
Right. I think because it was a true story, I'm not sure they would have gotten away with the idea that like somebody was following around the Blackberry guys for 10 years.
No, they would not have.
So, but I think it's interesting that he somehow kept the style, but just dropped the conceit that like there's people in the room with cameras filming them. It's more like I'm going to use the documentary style as a vibe and not a part of the storyline.
Right. And there's no talking heads. It's not like Office or Parks and Rec or anything like that.
Right. But there's not, I don't remember in Operation Avalanche. Are there talking heads in Operation Avalanche? There's
no, I
definitely
guess
not
not.
in Dirties.
I guess it's more, I guess that's probably shot just as documentary style too.
Yeah. It's all kind of in the moment documentary footage.
Yep.
But so Blackberry, I mean, does everybody know the story of Blackberry?
I did not. I mean, I knew what a Blackberry was, but I didn't know the story.
Okay. I mean, you knew the major beats. Blackberry was a thing. It was very popular, and then the iPhone killed it, right? Everybody knows that.
I guess I didn't know that Blackberry was the first smartphone.
Sure.
And like I found that interesting that these engineers at what a RIM, what's it? I've heard Blackberry RIM.
Yeah.
I just watched the movie. What did it stand for?
It's the name of their company.
Research in Motion. That's what it is.
Right. Research in Motion.
Like I didn't realize that the problem was hosting on a network.
Yeah, the network just didn't have the bandwidth for everything that they wanted the phone.
Correct. So then they solved the solution with like, well, instead of making the phones the host, we'll make the server the host. And I don't. So I found like that technical aspect very interesting, and I did not realize that they were the ones that kind of cracked the code on the smartphone and led into that era where other companies were trying to make a smartphone and would put like 10 phones on their network and it would crash because it was just chewing up so much bandwidth.
Yeah. Not only that, but they kind of invented the mini keyboard on a phone and a couple of other things that were pretty ubiquitous in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. I remember when iPhone came out and they were an AT&T exclusive. Part of the reason they did that is because AT&T was the only network that could handle what the iPhone wanted to do.
Right.
And so they knew like if they were going to release this, they had to get a partner and kind of work one-on-one with them and make sure that that network could handle it. And then eventually they would expand to other networks. And that's pretty much exactly what they did. They were exclusive with AT&T for like 3 or 4 years and then opened it up to other networks as the other networks prepared their own networks for.
As they played catch up for the iPhone, essentially.
For having an iPhone on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as like a movie telling a story of something that actually happened, but obviously it has embellishments here and there. I really like this movie. I was like entertained
Right.
by not only the beats of the story and like the things I didn't know and the representation of the personalities behind what was happening, but I also found it to be funny in a quirky but not annoying way. Like the characters didn't quite feel like real people, and that's not a criticism. I think that's intentional.
Yeah, they're heightened people.
They're caricatures, probably.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Like you got the kind of nerdy leader who is technical minded but can't negotiate his way out of a paper bag and like doesn't know how to deal with these business guys. And then you got the slick business guy who is a jerk but is alpha enough to walk into a room of other alphas and just kind of like outmaneuver them. And then you've got this sidekick guy who just wants to have fun with this and continue making cool things with his friends.
Right.
They're
Yeah,
kind of
like
the three leads.
you get introduced to this company in the 90s, and like they're making modems, but they're also like they're playing what was it? Red Alert. Command and Conquer Red Alert. They're doing like LAN parties, they're having movie nights, they're on chat boards. Like I would say half of it is a job and half of it is just a bunch of friends hanging out like in this new technology era.
Yeah, and kind of it's fun to work that way.
Right.
But the company itself is not really making money.
No,
so
they're actually getting screwed.
Right. It's not going to last, basically. And then when this slick business guy enters the picture, who's a jerk, he's like, hey, you have something here. If you just played your cards right, this could be a totally different situation.
We can make money off of this. Yeah.
Right. He gets involved, and then the rest of the movie happens. And Blackberry becomes a huge success before it crashes and burns. And I kind of loved the idea that they did not tell this story in like a very straight way. They allowed caricatures to exist and kind of acknowledged through the humor that like if this guy's going to be the evil one, we're going to make him evil. You know what I mean?
He's going to be like yelling at everyone and just dropping F-bombs and smashing phones.
Right. And we're never going to let you think that he's a good guy. You know what I mean? Like they never tried to be like, oh, there's two shades to this guy. They were just like, yep, he's exactly what you think he is. And well, we're just going to keep hammering that.
They do one thing where early on when the Jay Baruchel character, who he plays, I think Mike was his name. He's sort of the tech genius of the company. And then Glenn Howerton, who plays Jim, who's this alpha business a-hole. They get in the car, and at one point, Jim says or whatever, Mike says, can we make a promise not to lie to each other? And then like the alpha guy comes clean. He's like, yeah, I wasn't fired. This is actually what happened. And like, so you feel like, okay, here, maybe they actually will have an understanding. And they'll be like, even though they're two diametrically opposed personalities, as long as they're honest with each other, things will be okay. Obviously they're not. And things are not okay. So.
Sure. Well, I kind of feel like they were truthful with each other for a while. And
at the beginning. Yes.
Right. And then at some point it gets kind of too big for both of them to continue doing that, or I don't know.
Right. At one point there's a problem that they can't solve. Like they have grown as big as they can grow based on their technology. And they don't have the smarts to make their technology more compact or handle more data. So then the Glenn Howerton character, the alpha guy, he starts going around hiring other, essentially poaching engineers from like Google and other companies. And that's when the deceit kind of starts to set in between the two.
Sure.
And all these new people start showing up in the office that, the founder was not aware of or did not approve of these people either.
Yeah. I just liked that approach. I think it's very different than, like we saw with the Tetris movie recently, where it's like the Tetris movie felt the need to embellish in other ways, like with car chases that never happened and
the whole
KGB
like stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this one was like, from what I understand, pretty much stuck to the facts, but embellished the characters themselves because they didn't want it to be a history lesson type of thing. And they, instead of trying to be true to the essence of each person, instead they just took the characteristic that you would assume about them and played it up, you know, to just the level of like being turned off by the person. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like all the characters were right to the edge of you being like, I don't like these people. I don't care. Because none of them, short of like the code bro, you know, that wasn't one of the co-CEOs.
Right.
They do things in the movie where you're like, that's not a good thing. I don't like you anymore. Type of thing. The other thing that I think elevates this over some of those other similar movies is just the way it's shot. Like I couldn't really describe after seeing the movie like why I had a better reaction to this than I did to movies like the recent Tetris movie. But then after hearing Matt Smith talk like on a Q&A, I was like, that makes total sense. And it's that when he shot it, what he described was, as much as possible, when they shot it without anything but a camera. Like no lighting, just whatever the natural light in the room was. That's what they went with, as much as possible. And as much as possible, they shot from as far away as possible. And so they used nature, like National Geographic sized distance lenses.
Okay.
So he said that the scenes where they're kind of like in the room at Blackberry headquarters and like there's like all those engineers in the room and they're talking and they're like working something out or whatever, the guys at the whiteboard, he said they would fill the room with engineers and then have 3 cameras 100 feet back.
Okay.
And film from way back so that the engineers that were sitting there felt like they were actually in a meeting discussing this thing, because you didn't have a big crew or a guy with a boom in your way, or you know what I mean? You weren't shooting coverage of the person at the the whiteboard. You were shooting from the back of the room so that the cameras weren't in the scene, essentially. And so he said as much as possible, they tried to shoot that way where if they could get the actors to forget that there was a camera on them. And then they would do things like shoot the scene. They would shoot it word for word what the script is. And then once they got that, they'd be like, okay, now do the scene, but just like improvise it with the essence of what the dialogue was. And then he said 9 times out of 10, they went with that cut and not the dialogue itself.
Not the scripted. Yeah.
Because they would go through it a couple times scripted. So they knew what the high points were.
Right.
And so when they were improvising it, they just filled in with more natural language in between the high points type of thing. And I think it's interesting in that way. The other thing I heard him say is like, by doing it that way, some of the jokes that they put in the script they just got obliterated. So like half the jokes were just lost in the improvisation.
Well, right. Yeah.
But because of that, it's far more natural. And so when there is a joke that squeaked through, it's because it felt natural and not like a joke. And so the comedy in the movie is strange because it's a very situational and very like, you might be lost on this reference, but it's very Office style of like people looking at the camera and like shrugging and you know what I mean? Except they're not looking at the
Parks
camera.
and Rec though, so I understand the style. Yeah,
it's in there. And that's just like stylistically not the pattern of these movies.
And I think that's what makes this movie okay. So this movie, like I said, is shot like a documentary because the camera's always on the margins of the room. Right. In an actual documentary, like they're not up in people's faces. They're kind of shooting like from a distance, hey, what's happening, and trying to capture it all. And as you said, the camera is the same way here, or they're shooting through windows and people are having a conversation. They might actually be 2 rooms over, but there's like large windows between those. So they're shooting through those windows to get the conversation. Like there's never coverage. They're never doing like over the shoulder shots, like 2 people talking to each other.
Right.
And right, I think that's what gives this that natural and that documentary feel to it, and it does give you more of a in the moment of like, oh, this is how it's happening, even though it's these over the top characters who are screaming at each other or like can't stammer a word out sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I think even if you're not interested in the subject matter of Blackberry or the fall of Blackberry, the rise and fall of Blackberry, I still think if you're a fan of dramas,
Mhm.
it's interesting. And if you have been avoiding these, this is the one to watch. I
Yeah.
would say in this vein of like these types of movies, just because there's far more going on artistically than just the story of Blackberry.
And it's interesting watching a movie about a guy who like invented the first of something
Mhm.
and then gets surpassed by something else.
Sure. In like
And
record time.
right, yeah, and you know, and like how many what other pieces of technology have been like, oh yeah, so and so company made the first of this, but now we all use this one because this
Mhm.
is the better version of it.
Yeah.
And like
it's-
you
it's
almost kind of feel
MySpace.
right,
Blackberry
right,
is the MySpace of
exactly. Yeah, think about social media. Think about like search engines, right?
right.
Browsers. That you know, like we invented the internet. Like, well, we all use this now instead anyway. So,
Yeah.
and like you kind of feel for this guy at one point because you know he recognizes that the iPhone is a better product,
Mhm.
but he can't admit it. So he's trying to be like, oh well, but it doesn't have this, doesn't have that. They can't handle this again. I invented this. This is my thing. Like, well, yeah, like you did invent that, but like, and
Nobody
unfortunately, in
cares
the world
but
of
you.
technology, no one cares what you did. They want to know what are you doing.
Right.
And in the world of technology, if you're not innovating, then you are left behind.
Yeah, and essentially if it wasn't for them, then the iPhone might not have existed in the same way that it did. Like there wouldn't have been networks who were already thinking along these lines because
Right.
BlackBerry had gone through the growing pains it had gone through. And so that's got to be a hard pill to swallow at some point when you're getting annihilated. That like if the groundwork wasn't set by this smaller business
Mhm.
and these smaller inventions, then they probably wouldn't be in a position to make a better thing.
Right.
I do find it interesting though that like the iPhone was definitely a step up. It was a, you know, certainly a moment in tech that like is I don't know what you call it, a seminal moment if you were
Oh,
looking at like the progression of tech.
oh, I would say it's a society changing piece of technology, the iPhone.
Right. I forget where I was going with this.
I
don't
mean,
know.
you were kind of talking about like BlackBerry laying the groundwork for the iPhone.
Yeah. I think some of the history feels like it's been rewritten. That like um
Like
like
there
the-
was darkness and then there was the iPhone.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that it was a progression. It wasn't overnight. Oh, I know what I was saying. That I'm not sure that they have had, short of like the personal computer and then the iPhone, they haven't had another thing since. You know what I mean? As much as like whenever they come out with a product, they act like this is the next thing.
Mhm.
There really hasn't been much since 2007. That's
And
not
the
just
iPhone,
an
yeah.
iteration. Even the iPad is just like a big iPhone in a
Right.
way.
Yeah, it is. It's similar technology.
Right. And like touch screens, they existed before the iPhone. Maybe not in your hand, maybe not to make phone calls, but the idea, the concept of a touchscreen already existed.
Mhm.
It's not like they invented touchscreens. Now, using two fingers to pinch and zoom things, absolutely Apple's invention. You know what I mean? That was not a thing.
groundbreaking invention though.
No, I mean that
Pinch.
changed what you could do
Yeah.
with a touchscreen, I would say. Like the idea of a touchscreen before then was like it, like a TV presents you and you click and you change the screen itself, but
Right.
you don't zoom in and zoom out, things like that. Like that was not a thing that people did with touchscreens. Having 2 points of contact at the same time was not a thing you did with touchscreens before Apple did it on iPhone and iTouch at the time. So they definitely have innovations in there, but like the concepts were built before them. And so, yeah, I'm still kind of waiting for what's the next thing, whether it's from Apple or not. I don't feel like we've had anything in quite a while.
I mean, they just announced whatever. It's not called Apple Glass, whatever the goggles, the wearable tech.
Right.
But I just don't. I don't see that being mainstreamed yet. I just don't think people want to wear a huge headset.
I don't.
Right. Like maybe in their home. I just do not see like the majority of society all strapping on headsets and walking around the street.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they have to solve a bunch of things before that's a real thing.
I mean,
And one of them is don't make them look like ski goggles.
Right,
Don't
right,
make, like,
exactly.
a battery pack that has to sit in your back pocket while you do
Yeah.
it. You know, it just can't happen if you want people to accept it
I mean, we
as
saw
like their all day thing, like a
Right.
cell phone is.
something I found interesting, or I read that was interesting, was they were talking about the product launch for whatever. I can't remember what it's called. The Apple, it's not Glass, View, whatever they call it.
Yep.
And they're like every other product launch for Apple, they show the employee, Steve Jobs, whoever using the device. Like here's Steve Jobs making a phone call.
Mhm.
Here's someone using the iPod. For this Apple Glass launch, no one was actually wearing the product. It was just videos, but no one on stage during the demo actually strapped the product onto themselves.
Sure.
Like, what does that say if even your own team won't wear it during the launch?
Well, it's also a hard thing to communicate to people. Like the experience itself is like you can show people using it, but at the end of the day, if somebody on stage is demoing it, it's mostly just a dude standing there
And like
looking around
and interacting with the space in front of them. Yeah.
Right. And you can show a video of what they're seeing, but it's not the same thing as being inside of one. It's kind of like when do you remember when what's that, the little cart, the little scooter thing that what's the name of it? Paul Blart Mall Cop had one.
Segway.
A Segway.
Yeah.
When the Segway came out and they were like hyping it as like the newest brand new invention.
The car killers going to redefine cities. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then it came out and people are like, it's a scooter?
It's a scooter.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like when people are on it. Have you ever ridden on a Segway?
I did a Segway tour once. Yes.
It's more than a scooter. You know what I mean? It's kind of magic. It reads micro movements of your body to
right.
Move
you can make
forward and
little
back.
adjustments, and it's cool. Like I'm not gonna lie, it was fun.
It's absolutely cool, but it's one of those things that you have to get on before it makes sense as to why this is cool.
And you don't look cool riding it.
Right. Exactly. Just like with Apple's visor, any VR visor or augmented reality visor, watching people use it is not cool looking.
No.
At all. And I'm not sure being in it is that cool either, but if there is a cool factor, it's being in it far more than being seen with it on, for sure. So, yeah, I think they still have a lot of ways to go, both in being cool wearing it and also it just being usable in like any real way. Like they're talking about there's shots in that, this is way off Blackberry, but
yeah, but how are we bring this back to Blackberry?
There's shots in that announcement video of like somebody on the plane watching a movie and there's a 2-hour battery life. Who's watching a movie on a device that from beginning to end has a 2-hour battery life? Like get on a plane with 2 hours left on your cell phone and try to watch a movie. Good luck.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Right. So yeah, they just gotta, I could see it. I could imagine myself at home putting a visor on and watching a 2-hour movie that makes me feel like the movie's all around me. I could absolutely see myself doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Not for $3,000. and not with a 2-hour battery life.
And you're not gonna walk around the grocery store with it strapped to your head.
Yeah, I also can't imagine wanting to be on a plane and having no field of vision of what's going on around me on the plane. You know what I mean? Like that just does not feel like a realistic situation for most people to
Okay.
like completely have reality shut off around them. Now, I have no problem going to sleep.
Yeah.
That's essentially the same thing. So I don't know why, but the idea of like putting a visor over my head that like blacks out everything else feels like not something I'm going to do on an airplane.
Fair.
I don't know.
I'm gonna bring us back to Blackberry.
Please
Okay.
do that.
So when I saw Operation Avalanche, I liked the movie. I had a problem with Matt Johnson as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And after watching this movie, I feel the same way about Matt Johnson, the actor.
Really? You did not like his kind of character in this movie?
No, well, I mean, for one thing, and again, this could be, I'm not sure if this is his acting, the writing, the story, the idea that these are all heightened characters.
Mhm.
His character did not change over the 10 years this movie took. Like he's literally wearing the same thing through the entire movie. Like the red headbands and like whatever t-shirts.
Sure.
So like all the other characters at least had some changes and growth to who they were over a decade as this technology has changed. And he was like the same like college age party boy the whole time.
Sure.
And then I don't know, Matt Johnson just kind of played him as like open mouth. Like the whole time he's just sitting there like open mouth, kind of dumb. Like, what's going on? What are we doing here? And I just found that to be such a one-note character. I'm attributing that to Matt Johnson just based on the 2 times I've seen him as in performances.
Sure. I agree that his character is a little one note in this for sure.
He disappears at one point. Like,
yeah,
he's just kind of out of the movie at some point, and it's
well, they use him to be kind of like the to represent the idea of like the purity of what they're doing.
Right. Of
you know what I mean? He's more to represent that piece of it, to be like there's a business side to this and there's like the
fun side,
altruistic, but like yeah, let's have fun with this. Let's be buddies and make something together. And he represents the idea that like that attitude breeds success more than like the corporate meeting room, whatever, conference room,
boardroom.
There you go. And I also think it's by design that like he doesn't change and the other guys do,
right?
Or the other guy, his friend, becomes kind of a different person, but the business changed him. So I get it. I mean, Matt Smith is not an actor.
Matt Johnson, sorry. Matt Smith is an actor, but Matt Johnson. Matt Smith is an actor. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Matt Johnson has acted in roles. Does that make him an actor?
He's an actor in that the movies he's been in, and the TV show. Evidently, they have a TV show I haven't seen called Nirvana, the band, the TV show. Have you heard of this?
No. Has it anything to do with the actual like Kurt Cobain Nirvana?
Supposedly it's good, and I don't know if it
Okay.
has anything to do with Nirvana, but I do believe it has something to do with like a band in the 90s. But supposedly that's good. It has a cult following. The people that love it really love it. I haven't seen it, but anyway, so everything that he's done so far, he's starred in.
Right.
But again, the Q&A I watched with Matt Johnson was like, I didn't want to be in this movie. Like, I've been in all the other things because I had to be in order to get them made. Like, we made things on shoestring budgets.
Right.
Whatever. This was the first time he was given a decent amount of money. Didn't want to be in it. And then Jay Baruchel told him that he wanted him to play the other guy.
Okay.
And that evidently they become friends outside of the movie business because they're both Canadians and a bunch of other things. And so when they talked about making this movie, Jay was excited about it because he hasn't had a movie in a long time, and it wasn't like, what do you call it? Who's the director of the group of people? The guy who did like 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Oh, Judd Apatow.
Yeah, it wasn't like the Judd Apatow crew. Like
Right.
Jay Baruchel, from what I can tell, was kind of done with the Judd Apatow crew after This Is the End.
Yeah, and he also has what's the other one called? How to Train Your Dragon. He does the voices for that.
Right. Which I'm sure paid very well for not much.
Oh, he did 3 of those, yeah. So
Yeah, right. So yeah, he saw this as like an opportunity to be comedic, but also stretch things beyond what the Judd Apatow world will give him the opportunity to do. So anyway, my point is, I think even Matt Johnson would agree that he's not the best on camera. And that I heard him say in that Q&A that he's looking forward to the next movie that he makes, which he will hopefully not be in. he's like, I don't want to be in these.
Okay, I'm totally fine. Like I've got nothing with. I think as a director, he's interesting.
Yeah.
So I would definitely see more directed movies by him, and he's not gonna be a movie killer for me. Like if he's in it, he doesn't ruin the movies, but he's just definitely not my
not
favorite
your cup
part.
of tea.
Who I did like in this movie a lot was Michael Ironsides, who's kind of brought in as like the COO, and he basically became like the babysitter of the engineers. And I thought, again, he was over the top, but like Michael Ironside is such gravitas and such intimidation to him,
right?
That he was able to, like, his character was great in this movie of just like
he's tasked with like corralling all the engineer nerds,
right? Yeah,
like,
and like rooting
keeping
movie
them on
nights
task.
and get them on tracks to actually get a product out on time. So, and at one point he's like patrolling the development room like a drill sergeant.
Right.
Like,
and he's essentially just out alphaing like 50 guys, basically.
Right. Yeah. So
like they're listening to him because he's being mean to them, basically.
Right, because he's yelling at them and calling them nasty names and like, okay, I guess go to work now. So,
right. Yeah.
I thought he was fun.
All right, let's summarize this.
Okay.
My final thoughts on the movie is that I really enjoyed it. I recommend it for people who are into interesting dramas, even if you don't care about Blackberry at all. I think it's worth a watch.
Yeah, I think this is the third kind of this movie we've watched this year. And it's my favorite of the 3.
Yeah. Whenever a movie can like elevate itself artistically or just be more interesting than the subject matter itself, maybe not more interesting, it can augment what's interesting about something. I think that's a good attempt, and this is definitely one of those for me.
Yep.
So, all right, I gave it 4.5.
4.5. Wow. I think I'm giving it a 4 just because I think I gave like Air a 3.5 and Tetris a 3. So if I like this one the best, it should probably be a 4.
Fair enough. That kind of logic makes sense.
That's my logic for that one. So
absolutely,
they're all on a curve apparently. So
sure. All right. 4 and a 4.5 for Blackberry. That's it for this week. It was fun to do a double feature with you, Kyle.
Yeah, me too. Or you too.
Excited to actually get to talk about Blackberry. Wasn't sure that was
so
going to happen.
I was not going to watch this movie, but you kept bringing it up of like, oh, it's so good. You guys have to watch this. I'm like, okay, fine. I gave in. Like, I think even for this week, I was like, oh, let's do Extraction 2 plus a list. And you're like, or we could do this double feature. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Fine. Just want you to stop talking about Blackberry. And I liked it.
We can stop talking about it now.
Okay, good.
I'm fine with it. I think it'll probably make my top 20 at the end of the year. We'll see.
Yeah, there's a chance. It's 2023 has been a bit of a weak year for me so far.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, we're not that far into it as far as prestige movies go.
Like I haven't had like a Northman or a Everything Everywhere or an Annihilation. Like usually there is a movie in the first half of the year that really clicks with me.
Across the Spider-Verse didn't really click with you?
Well, okay, so Across the Spider-Verse, that might be okay. There we go. That might be the one. But up until Across the Spider-Verse, nothing had really like totally clicked as like, oh yeah, this is a special movie from the year.
Interesting.
I think Beau is Afraid was maybe that movie for you and Zach, but it was obviously not for me.
That's true. You didn't like that movie.
I did not care for that movie. But you're right. We're not into award season yet, so things can still change.
I thought you liked the menu. Or was the menu last year?
That was technically last year. Yes, it was end of last year, but it was last year.
Gotcha. Same thing with Women Talking. That was last year.
That was the end of last year. Yeah. So
no John Wick.
I mean, I know I liked John Wick 4. Like, it is my number one of 2023. Well, no, not Spider-Verse is, but it was my number one of 2023 for a while.
Right.
But it like John Wick 4 didn't feel like it wasn't a surprise. Like it was John Wick 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it delivered what I wanted effectively.
I mean, I'm really shocked that Little Mermaid's not going to make your top 20. I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying nothing's going to make my top 20 yet because we're not. Award season could be crap.
Sure.
Like I may have Little Mermaid as like number 20. Tetris is number 18. Who knows?
Could be. You never know.
What I do know is Beau is Afraid is going to be towards the bottom.
Be on your worst list?
Oh, yeah.
You think it's a worst or just like you didn't like it as much as other people did?
Well, I mean, if I'm ranking my top 20 favorite, then I could do my top 5 least favorite. So.
Oh, it could enter a least favorite.
Oh, for sure.
Wow. I didn't think do you feel now that you're like a month or two out that you dislike it even more now than you did your initial reaction?
I don't think I've really thought about it much since I've seen it.
Really? I think about it all the time.
Okay. Well, good. I'm happy for you. Got more important things to think about than Beau is Afraid.
That's pretty much all I think about. Not true. Thank you for joining us for this episode 588 of the Cinereelists. We appreciate your listenership. Don't forget, there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Cinereelists. Find us there and watch while you listen. You could also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support us, get extra after show audio amongst other Cinerealist swag. Don't forget, you could also leave us an Apple Podcast review. We appreciate that. It's free, it's easy, it's fast. Do it. 5 stars only. Also, send us a listener email, heyguys@cinerealists.com. REEL with an S on the end. Send us a comment, a question, a list suggestion, a movie suggestion, any of those kinds of things via email, and we will discuss it on the podcast on a future episode. You could also follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Cinereelists, or follow me, my personal Twitter or Letterboxd account at YoJRB.
You can find me on Letterboxd at PeterSKB.
We will be back next week without Zach, but with 2 guests for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We did a little podcast crossover where we're going to play some games, some movie games. The rare solo movie game episode, meaning like all we do is play movie games.
Correct. Yep.
But with 2 guests that have been on the podcast before, but have not been on the podcast for a couple of years. So it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Nice. We'll see you guys there. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.